examine the connection between poetry and scholarship, as pointed out by C.M. Baura. Sir Maurice Baura has thrown light on the intimate relationship between poetry and scholarship. This relationship has been so subtle that it has not been perceived by many. A great poet has always happened to be a great scholar, and a great scholar has always been a great poet. From Dante to Hopkins, it has been the rule rather than the exception. It has been the rule rather than the exception. Even then, the fact remains that the poet and the scholar have always been different beings with two different ends and means. This subtle distinction has been made by Vivid in the essay entitled Poets and Scholars. Baura says that the relationship between a poet and a scholar has witnessed a great changes. This is because the scholars often forgot their prime duty. Puffed up with pride, the scholars have often tried to teach the poets their business. This has resulted in bad taste on the part of poets. The poets have often viewed the scholars with contempt and disrespect. That is why same. That is why same. That is why some poets declared war against the scholars. For example, Pope savaged the scholar in his Dunciad. In the words of Pope, plunged for his sense but found no bottom there. In the same way, W. Beats in our days has vehemently commented on the role of the scholar in his poem The Scholars. The Romantic poets gave a serious blow to the delicate relationship of a scholar with a poet, as they were not prepared to acquiesce in the old traditions and assumptions. They no longer thought it their duty to conform to established rules. They assumed that the only relevant rules were their own. They asserted their individuality and freedom from the past. They rejected all things that savored of the academic. These romantics put a stress on imagination. With the help of imagination, they often got transcendental visions. Such visions were not based upon traditions and reason. Thus, poems during the Romantic period were written not on the accumulated wisdom and art of the past. A poem was written on the basis of personal imagination, with the result that the need for a scholar diminished gradually. Besides, the spread of education towards the latter part of the 19th century gave momentum to the study of works by romantics. A variety of people engaged themselves in this discipline. This has spoiled the very basis of the strength which poetry once drew from a single accepted tradition. The poet must now work on his own, fashions new images and symbols to replace these canonized by the past. Thus, the work started by the Romantics towards the beginning of the 20th century was completed. People started thinking that the poet and the scholars have got nothing to do with each other. A movement was started in France which led to the belief that a poem did not have anything and did not have any meaning. The pioneers of this movement believed that the intelligible content of poetry was not indispensable. Naturally, no one felt the need for a scholar to interpret a poem. It was this movement which made much modern poetry the private affair of a poet. But this movement was neither sound in logic nor profitable in practice. That is why it could not impress the people for long. In England, the latest generation of poets recognized the claims of intelligibility. They tried to give it its due. These poets happened to be scholars too. Thus, the enmity between the poet and the scholar evaporated. The scholars started helping the poets by collecting information from China, Japan, and modern Greek literature. That is why the present situation has again compelled us to reconsider the relationship of a scholarship to poetry. It has been accepted that the old obligations of a scholarship still hold good in the new conditions. The first obligation of the scholar is to see that the work of an undiscovered genius is not to be wasted. It is the duty of a scholar to see that the poet is treated properly. This has happened with Clare, Blake, Holderlin, and Hopkins. Much of the growth of Hopkins' reputation is due to Bridges, who worked on him. He published his letters and not books. He unraveled the theory of meters and rhythms. He got his poems published in time. That is why Hopkins was accepted with great regard by all and sundry. Now, poetry is not a private pastime of a poet. It is an educational discipline. It makes new demands on a scholar to present it fairly and fully.